Hey everyone, and welcome to this very special video that I am honored to present alongside Jason Yang. Jason Yang is a game designer at Second Dinner, and today we're going to be discussing the latest season in Marvel Snap, the X-Men End of Days. Jason, how are you today?
Good. How are you? Excited to be here.
Jason, why don't you introduce yourself and give us an idea of what it is you do at Second Dinner and how you contributed to this latest season in Marvel Snap.
I'm Jason. I am a game designer at Second Dinner, and I was the lead on the X-Men End of Days season. A lot of this season was developed in lockstep with the previous season, actually, and I collaborated a lot with the other season lead, Jules, on the objective mechanic, and we did a lot of collaboration to ensure that the design spaces of the Horsemen lined up, there would be space and synergy where needed, and just to make sure that the objective mechanic was developed in a way that served both seasons in a great way and came out with a lot of excitement and cool stuff for players.
That is actually a great place to start as well, because I have a question about the objective mechanic. First of all, I love it. I think it's really well designed. Kudos to you and your team. I think it's a lot of fun to experiment with, and it actually has resulted in a lot of very interesting plays and new archetypes emerging in Marvel Snap. But I'd be curious about how have you guys felt about the reception to objective? I see it as being very positive, and how has that reinforced the design for this season's cards? And more importantly, how do this season's cards propel objective going into the future?
Yeah, we've been super excited to see players engaging with the new mechanic and trying out all the new cards. It's been super cool seeing all the experimentations players have done with deck building as new cards release, and watching as people figure out what the best new ways to use the new cards are. I mean, people get so many reps on these cards and so many reps in game, so much more than we can even imagine exploring in design, so we're always super excited to see what players do out in the wild. This season comes with objective support for even more decks to give more reach to the mechanic. In particular, I'm excited to see what people do with Strife as one of the most open-ended objective cards we're releasing.
Strife is exactly where I wanted to go next, which is perfect, because Strife is the premium season pass card, and I actually have a question. How do you determine at Second Dinner which card is going to be the season pass card? And what made Strife the ideal choice for the X-Men End of Days season?
Strife is a 4/6 with objective, play 3 on-reveal cards with the reward of use the highest cost on-reveal in your hand. You can play out a bunch of little small on-reveals like Rocket or Silver Sable, and then get a massive playoff in something like Fin Fang Foom or Odin to create a bunch of cool combos. There's a lot of open-endedness in this card. I'm excited to see what people do with it. For Season Pass cards, we try to pick characters that are either iconic in Marvel lore or embody the themes of their seasons super well. For Strife, we wanted to create juxtaposition between the two X-Men seasons, between the past and the future. As a super strong character whose story is heavily influenced by Apocalypse and is closely associated with time travel, Strife felt like the perfect fit to follow up from Apocalypse into this new season of new Horsemen and new objective cards.
One of the most unique cards this season is the super premium season pass card, Techno-organic Virus. This is actually one of the coolest cards you guys have designed in the longest time, in my opinion. And why don't you walk us through the infect mechanic and how it can be used in deck building?
Yeah, this one's pretty unique. We took it from a top-down perspective of what does a virus look like on a card, and what does infecting and assimilating people into the Techno-organic virus look like. And so what this card does is that it replaces the text of your cards at the location that you play it to. It creates a parasitic effect that rewards you for having multiple cards infected with the Techno-organic, and it spreads like a virus coming back to your hand, allowing you to replay it later just at a higher cost. It lets you give a persistent bonus to cards like on reveals that have already taken effect, or you can override detrimental effects like Starbrand and Red Skull to give them a little bit of a bonus now. One of the coolest things that we found was adding stuff like Spectrum to your Sauron deck to enable new endgame combos with the Techno-organic virus.
Coming out the same week in Series 5 is going to be Wolverine, the Horseman of War. What makes the design of this version of one of Marvel's most iconic characters stand out to you as a game designer?
The intent with this version was to create a clean and flexible fit into decks that want to buff cards, being both a target and enabler himself for those effects. We'd originally explored objective requirements such as having a ton of power at a location, having full locations, or maybe even winning locations a certain amount of times as the input for this objective to get that bonus. Ultimately though, we landed on a design that was a cleaner fit for Wolverine being a force multiplier for buff effects, bringing a bunch of power to the war.
And with Wolverine, obviously this is the type of card, especially as a 4 cost, that can start to get incorporated into some other objective-based decks. What are some of the other objective cards from the prior season that you think are going to work particularly well with Wolverine?
Part of what our development philosophy here is actually some mix of synergy between Horsemen and Horsemen standing on their own. For a while, we actually had these cards structured as you want to play, for example, all of the Horsemen in the first season together, or both of the Horsemen of War together. There were a few constraints that came out of that, like, for example, we didn't want to force people to get the second Horseman of War in order to make the first Horseman of War good, or we didn't want to force players to get every single Horseman from one season for them to even, like, stand a chance, and so we decided to opt for a more standalone approach.
That same week, alongside Wolverine and the others, is the launch of Deadpool's Diner, and along with it, the opportunity to earn a brand new card, Askani Son. To say that it's a busy start to the season would be an understatement, so my question for you, Jason, would be, how have limited time game modes been received by the community? Because for me, they've been a massive boon to the fun factor that I've experienced in Marvel Snap. I love them, I'm sure many others feel the same, but I'd be interested on your take on it as a game designer.
Glad to hear it. The team has put a ton of hard work into putting out a suite of game mode options that we can run as a core part of our live operations. We're hoping that the rotating suite of game modes gives players new content to look forward to each season, and we'll keep looking for ways to provide fresh spins on our existing game modes like our April Fool's Day Grand Arena.
Going back to Askani Son, it's a fascinating design and the kind of card that feels like it can go into almost any deck at any collection level. What inspired this seemingly universal design for a card?
One of the things I wanted to do with this card was to leverage the numerical scaling we implemented for Objective in a different way. The creative top line for this character was based upon combining the concepts of time travel and portals, with the strength of the created card scaling over time and being brought in with a portal. We're excited to see how players enjoy playing around this minigame both with and against it.
Now, we can't move off of limited time game modes quite yet because late April comes Grand Arena, and within it, you can earn yourself Mother Askani, which is almost a mix between Majestic Wingbeat and Friggin. I think it has the potential to work well alongside of Marvel Snap's biggest cards like Fin Fang Foom and Zombie Galacti. How do you see a card like this fitting within the Marvel Snap meta?
Yeah, part of the inspiration for this card was the moment in her story where she creates a clone of who is Askani's son into Strife, and so she's actually a super big part of the story of those two characters. A card like this has a super wide range of applications, and we're excited to see what players come up with to pair this with. Plenty of cards like Sebastian Shaw and Maverick are clear pairings to be force multipliers on her buff. She can also serve as a copier for some of your objective cards. One of my favorite decks I saw in testing was using Mother Askani in a Bullseye deck to double up on Dakin. We're not only excited for the applications this season, but also for what it enables for combos with future card releases and what players do with it as time goes on.
That's actually a great point, right? When you design cards in Marvel Snap, you can never evaluate a card in a vacuum. How do you plan for what cards are coming in the future for what you're releasing today and what synergies might exist?
Yeah, it can be a little bit difficult depending on how far the synergies are and when they're released. We try to just keep a rotating pool of all the cards that we've already signed off on and shipped, and keep them in rotation to keep them in decks, start running them with new cards. It can be really easy to forget about them because as you're testing cards, especially in the context of live balance, we see all of the decks that are good in the current metagame, but those decks don't contain the cards that haven't released yet and are probably coming in just a month. And so we just actively keep a mind of remembering to keep these cards in decks, remembering to keep them in our minds as we look at both the live metagame and our internal stuff coming out.
We're back at the objective keyword with Archangel, who's coming out on April 14th. As a game designer, do you see destroy decks as like a baseline for the Marvel Snap meta? And the reason why I ask this is because they're so consistent, and yet across all collection levels, they are very capable of getting players towards Infinite and beyond. Do you think that Archangel could take destroy to the next level?
Destroy decks are one of the single most popular archetypes in the game across different executions of it, like Nimrod, Dormammu, and just the classic destroy decks. With Gambit taking the direction of destroying enemy cards in the Death Horseman mantle, we knew we wanted Archangel to focus on a more typical destroy route that's more constructive to your own game plan, which is kind of ironic given the destroy mantle. Some of the directions we considered originally were requirements of destroying one card of a sufficient power, destroying a bunch of high power cards, or pay off stat destroyed cards itself. Ultimately, we decided on something that fits more cleanly into existing destroy structures and gives player a bonus for just doing the thing more often and spamming a bunch of destroys. We're excited to see what players brew with this effect and how the archetype evolves.
You actually bring up something that I think is a core component of what I enjoy about Marvel Snap, and that is the fact that you can get a new card like Archangel for Destroy, and you can either slot this card into existing variations of the Destroy archetype, or you can try to brew something new altogether. How does that approach to deck building inspire you as a game designer?
Yeah, with Marvel Snap, we have a very interesting set of constraints where every single card can go into every single deck. We don't have this, like, for example, Magic has colors, Hearthstone has classes, where a bunch of cards are segmented into different applications. There's a lot of risks with this, actually, in that if you have a card that's good enough, and this has happened in the past, it just kind of shows up in every deck, and we think that ends up with a negative impact in the metagame because you just see less cards, and we think that it's more fun when you get to play against a variety of different metagames, and you get to have a lot more creativity in your deck building. And so when we think about a card, a lot of the times it can be helpful for us to use existing decks as a baseline, but we also think about what can be created from this card's release and what kind of packages can happen as well. For example, the zombie mechanic, where it creates its own archetype on its own, but we do want the cards to be exciting on their own right. So Zombie Scarlet Witch can have some applications with just typical Merlin and Kitty Pryde stuff. Zombie Mr. Fantastic has applications with created cards, but all of them do come together in a holistic way to create an archetype on their own. There's a bit of a gap bridging effect where some cards can release and then build the foundation for other mechanics and decks to form over time. And there's also ways where we just introduce cards that fit into existing archetypes already, and we think that's also an exciting way to create new content and new spins on existing decks as well.
Polaris, the Horseman of Pestilence, looks like an incredible affliction card that should fill a role similar to that of Dragon Lord in ramp decks, except now we're looking at it in affliction decks. As a game designer, how do you think that she's going to fit in the affliction-based archetype?
As Pestilence, Polaris gains the ability to absorb and manipulate diseases. This felt like the perfect fit for an objective card that hooks into Affliction as she uses the afflictions in play to fuel her output. We'd originally considered making a big Affliction as an output of this card, but decided to leave that for Caliban instead. For most of the Horsemen, we didn't really focus on targeting them all at the same deck too much in favor of letting them shine more individually. We did think, however, that it'd be fun to have at least one of the Horseman classes play well with each other, and so Caliban and Polaris are built to line up nicely, with Caliban encouraging you to put out a bunch of heavy cards in your deck for a big Afflict, and Polaris taking that Afflict to pull them out. Even without Caliban, though, Polaris fits really well aside existing cards like Hazmat and Omega Sentinel to pull out big cards like Ajax.
Okay, so I have to take this opportunity because I'm with a Marvel Snap game designer. I have to ask, when it comes to Polaris, a card that is an affliction card through and through, how does someone like Luke Cage factor into your design of a card like this, considering he is such a universal release valve for the affliction archetype?
When we design a card that gets hit super hard by a tech card, we think a little bit about both how hard it gets hit by the tech card, what applications that tech card has in the meta, how prevalent it is, and also what ability does the player playing the deck have to combat against the tech card in turn. With Luke Cage, at times he's super prevalent in the meta, at times he isn't. We'd expect that in times where Affliction is super good, he's naturally going to be better and naturally going to show up a little bit more. But as an Afflict player, you also have the opportunity to play cards like Rogue and other ongoing counters to pull back a little bit in that push and pull between the tech card and the Afflict archetype. The big thing is that when we make cards, we can't be looking at them through the lens of how they are affected by tech, because the intent of the tech is to weaken them when they are too strong and give players that ability to fight back. And so if it turns out that a tech card is too strong, we'll then have to pull back on the tech card itself rather than the archetype if it turns out that it's completely shutting the archetype out of the game. And it's also super flexible to be included in a bunch of different decks. One of our goals here is to provide a lot of meta flexibility and meta diversity, and if a tech card being too good reduces that, then we'll of course pull back on the tech card itself.
We end the X-Men End of Day season with one of the most iconic heroes in the Marvel universe, and that is Storm, the Horseman of Famine. My question for you, Jason, is what's it like working on such an iconic hero from Marvel lore? Does it ever impact your approach to designing the card or even determining the strength of the card?
It's always cool to work on one of the really cool characters in Marvel. Our approach to iconic characters has changed a little bit over the years, but right now some of our thought processes are balancing out the iconic parts of the character with the gameplay goals of the season. For example, in the Fantastic Four season, we highlighted Mr. Fantastic's intellectual prowess to serve as an enabler in the end of turn deck rather than going straight up with some physical abilities and the stretchiness. With Storm, her current card can be a little bit problematic to be strong due to her disruptive nature, so we knew that we wanted to make a version that we'd be happy to see more broadly played in this version of the card. We decided to hook into an energy mechanic to tie into her lightning flavor and have her charge up to create a big burst of power. Storm focusing on charging up as a gameplay hook felt like it fit really nicely with the objective mechanic, while also being a clear fit for her powers in the lore.
Jason, on behalf of the entire Marvel Snap community, I want to take a second to say thank you so much for not only discussing these exciting new cards coming to Marvel Snap, but more importantly, showing us some insight into how these cards are designed, built, and engineered at Second Dinner.
We are super excited to see these cards in the hands of players. We're super excited to see what you guys do with them. And on behalf of the entire team at Second Dinner, thank you all for playing Marvel Snap, and keep on snapping.